All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. If others join us, that's cool as well. And it looks like we've got some people from our first group and some people from our second group. But the gist of this is a monthly check-in to share ideas, answer questions. These are very interactive, of course. And I usually kick us off by just sharing a couple little nuggets of insight, and then we can just have an open dialogue. And the whole goal, again, is to build on this notion of family, to make sure that we are helping each other in this journey. You've got a support system, a support group, and it's to just provide as much help as we can for each other so that we can all soar together. So I think about today what to cover, and there are two fairly important calls in the process of closing and delivering a keynote. And I wanted to walk you through my approach on those. I thought it might be helpful, and open to any discussion or if anyone has any questions. But the two calls that are important, one is called a pre-booking call, and the other is called a kickoff call. Now, different people, I'm sure, have different terminology. Hey, Ben, how you doing? Welcome.
Hey, guys.
We're just diving in here, so it's perfect timing, Ben. We're just talking about two important calls that happen in the sort of telling and delivering the keynote. Anyway, people may have different names for them. That's what we call them, a pre-booking call and a kickoff call. But the notion is these are two really important calls to establish the relationship with the client and to ultimately position yourself for additional business. So the pre-booking call for us, we define that as a call before a contract is signed. So this is the client is interested in you. They're interested in enough to get on a phone call with you, but they've not yet made a decision. So this is a sales call. The second call, which we call a kickoff call, is after a contract has already been signed. So they've already decided, to hire you, and now this is the chance for you to get to know each other and to make sure that all expectations are set and ultimately met. So I'll walk you through my strategy for each of them. I'm sure you probably have been to, and probably have some good things to add, or all of us do, or questions. But these are important calls that would be good to share some best practices. The first thing I do on a pre-booking call, first thing is start with gratitude. Absolutely first thing. So they might say, okay, so Josh, tell me about your background. I'd say, hey, even before we begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your consideration. I appreciate you, you're looking at me for this event. I'd be delighted to contribute. I really appreciate you taking some time today. So for me, just set the tone with gratitude. There's no way it can hurt. The next thing I think is important to note is, what's your goal in the call? What's the desired outcome? For me, the desired outcome is a few things. Make them feel understood. People only buy, or not only, but generally buy when they feel understood. And human beings have a strong need to feel understood. So I think that's a key component. Second one is make them feel like you're both a safe and an exciting choice. As we know, we talked about the boot camp, many decisions are based on fear. They're worried that you're going to screw it up and they're going to look foolish in front of their CEO. It's a big meeting. So safety is a really important component here. And then also at the same time, make them feel pumped up. Like this, you're going to deliver some really exciting, fresh content. And then also a third goal for me in this call is establishing a relationship. Trying to get it so you're not just a name on a page. There's some type of connection. So those are my three goals. Make them feel understood, make it feel safe and exciting, and establish a relationship. So from there, what I like to do is, they're often it's kind of like an interview, but I try to turn it as quickly as I can back on them. So even if they said, oh, Scott, tell me all about what you like to speak of. And your instinct is to say, oh, here's all my thing. I just say, I'd be happy to share that. And before I do, can you tell me a little bit about this event? So I really like them to start talking if I can any way make that happen. And I say open-ended questions like, even beside my slide on the agenda, what's the overall objectives of your event? Who's coming? Tell me about the audience. What's going on in your business? So I ask them broader questions that apply not just to me, but they demonstrate that I care about them and that I'm going to be more holistic than me just being like, hey, I'm just going to, what's my time slot? I'm going to go recite my lines. You're selling by asking questions in probably a more effective way than if you were just telling them all about you. So the questions that you ask signal your thought process and how you go about it. And most times people find that very heartening. Some of the feedback that I have from that, people like, wow, you're the only speaker that's ever asked me that. Usually people just tell me all about them. It's so great that you care about us, that you want to learn. So again, that's the way I always try to ask them a bunch of questions. The next thing I do is I try to demonstrate some knowledge or connection with them. I try to find some thread. So if it's a healthcare event, I might say, oh, I sit on the board of a major healthcare system in the Detroit area. If it's a financial services one, specifically insurance, I say, oh, my dad was in that business. I grew up learning about that around the dinner table. If it's a tech thing, I have some tech background. So what I'm trying to do is establish some type of personal connection where they're like, oh, this guy really understands our industry. One thing that's very easy to do is have just a couple pieces of jargon at hand. So right now, a lot of the financial advisors, for example, are dealing with this thing with the DOL, Department of Labor. There's a new standard under which they're measured. It's called the fiduciary standard. So I couldn't tell you much more about it than that, maybe a sentence. But I might say, listen, I know you're under a lot of pressure right now with the new fiduciary standard from the DOL. So just that, they're like, wow, this guy gets us. Again, people want to feel understood, and they're trying to create some type of thread or connection. It also could be a personal connection. If it turns out they have some connections to Detroit, now like I'm their Detroit buddy. If it turns out they have some connection to music and I play jazz, like there's some connection. So whatever the connection you can find, I just like to make sure I'm establishing and leading with that little thread, so you're not just another number on their consideration list, but there's something personal to it. So now eventually it comes to them, asking about you. And so what I like to do is, even if they ask me a specific question, like, what topic would you recommend we go with? I always say, I'll answer that. I said, but before we get to that, let me just, if I may, just zoom out a little bit and share a big picture. And what I do here is I want to demonstrate why I do this, what my approach is, or other big picture things. So they really start to get to know you a little bit rather than just asking their tactical question. And so what I've done is I actually have 4 key points that I want to emphasize. And ideally, I'm not trying to divert their question. I will answer whatever question they have. But I want to get these 4, for me, these are my 4 points. Feel free to borrow them. You might have your 4 points of your own. But the point is going into the call with a deliberate strategy. So you know what your 4 points are, or 5 points, and you're ready to make sure that these are the things that you're going to drill them in. Just like a politician would have, the 4 talking points. And these are your 4 talking points. So mine are, number 1, I let them know that I try to strike a balance between being energizing and practical. I say on the one hand, there are some keynote speakers that are very energizing and they tell great stories and it's really fun, but then now people leave and shrug their shoulders and say, well, now what? So I want to absolutely be fun and energizing and inspiring and all that, but I also want to make sure I'm leaving people with some practical tools so that it has a direct impact on their business. So that in the months and years to come, they may be referencing back to a tool or technique, a very practical tool that I've shared in the keynote. So, but to me, however I say it, the goal is to emphasize that there's a yin and yang going on between energizing and practical. The second key point that I try to make sure that they hear is that I'm doing this because I want to, not because I have to. And to a degree, it's funny, when we were doing sales back in the day, and people would call up and say, oh, hello, Mr. Warner, you're already putting yourself below the person buying. And I try to make it so that you're at least eye to eye. And so I don't want to put myself like, oh, I just need this speech so bad. Even if I want to do the speech, I want them to know that I do this work because I love it, because I care, because I want to make an impact, not because I have to have the money right this second. And so I try to make sure that they understand that I'm there for a higher purpose than just like cashing a check. The third thing that I always try to emphasize, and you'll have perhaps your own 4 points, you're welcome to borrow any of mine, but my third point is I want to make sure that they understand that I will customize the talk for them. That I'm not just going to be a wind-up down. I'll pick speech number 3 and I'll go recite my lines. That I certainly will retell a story if I feel it's appropriate, but that I'm going to custom craft the talk for their needs. So if they are in the coffee cup manufacturing business, my team and I will do research on coffee cup manufacturing, and we'll share examples and trends, and we'll refer back to their industry to make sure that it's relevant. I tell them right away that my goal is to make every minute count. So that's a big selling point. People they don't want to feel that you're just like, here's your speech, and after you give the same speech to everybody. Everyone knows that there's some repetition, that you're going to perfect some stories, and that they want that. It's not like they want you to just like ad-lib the whole thing. But at the same time, just knowing that there's a little bit of customization, you're going to be speaking their language, that the stories that you choose are for their needs, that tends to play very well. And the last point that I like to make, one of my key talking points, is that I'm drama-free. So, and you don't have to, say anything negative about others, but just say, listen, life is too short to have drama. And so I'm just like zero maintenance. No special requests, no weird boundaries. If you want me to come a little bit early, talk to the meeting planner or your CEO, great. I don't need any fancy, outrageous demands in my hotel room. I just joke around, like, I'd like a bottle of water, and that's about it. So I also want them to know that not only is the content going to be good, but that I'm going to be easy to work with. So the point of that last message is that this is going to be a pain-free process. You're not going to be, dealing with some diva. It's quite the opposite. I'm here to serve, and we'll lay back, easygoing feedback. Again, those are my 4 points. I make sure that I hit those points at every call. And for whatever your points are, I would suggest that you have a deliberate approach to sharing them. Another key thing for me is that showing a combination between enthusiasm and professionalism. This isn't one of my 4 points I just mentioned, just a general purpose concept, but they want you to feel enthusiastic. Like if you're not excited about it, how are they going to be excited about it? You're like, yeah, I talk about customer service, and you got to show some energy here. And so you want to make sure that that's flying through the phone. Another suggestion, it doesn't always work, but if you have an opportunity to tease out a story or a key point or your position on something, that has a real impact on closing deals. So I feel strongly about certain, for example, especially when there's a little twist. So I might say, I'll tell you, I'm frustrated because most organizations feel that if they just keep doing things the same way again and again, they'll keep getting the same result. But the truth is today, we're living in such turbulent times that that's a real recipe for failure. So that wasn't really like a story. I didn't really give them part of my speech, but I gave them like a point of view on something. And so if I'm just looking at you, Ben, right now, and you're like, listen, so often people feel that they have these impossible dreams, but they're totally unattainable. And what I like to do is flip that upside down and help people connect with their most impossible dreams and help them come to life. So you're just sort of teasing out some content. And the goal for me in this is get the other person on the call nodding, like, oh yeah, we need some of that. We need some Ben in our life. So and it could be a story. You could say, hey, here's a quick little, and you could if you have like a short story, a 90-second story from your talk, and they can hear you share it, or a quick anecdote. Again, you're making the point that you've got something important to say that their audience needs to hear. 2 other things that I like to do on a pre-booking call, and then I just open up to any questions or feedback. One is if I feel like we're getting there, I like to provide a multiple choice. So here's what I mean. Like instead of saying, now I'm trying to shift in my mind and their mind that they've already decided on me, even though they haven't. So I might say something like, hey, we could do this in a couple of formats. One thing I could do is let's say there was 90 minutes. I could do a 60-minute keynote and then have like a 30-minute fireside chat. I could interact with the audience and take some questions, and it would feel very intimate and conversational. Another approach that we could take is I could spend about 45 minutes in the keynote, and then we could do a 45-minute workshop where we're breaking into little mini teams and they're getting to practice some hands-on innovation techniques. Which of those 2 do you think would be best for your audience? So whatever multiple choice you might choose to offer, but by offering that multiple choice, you're sort of putting their mindset in a place where, oh yeah, they've kind of already selected you. And now they see that they're part of the decision process and that you're going to kind of co-create the content together. So it's giving them a sense of control and ownership. And also you're sort of, now I've kind of tiptoed into the realm of, we're doing this, not we might be doing this. And the other thing I do is, last tip, is I like to speak, not in a cocky way, but to a degree as if this is happening. So I would say something like, hey, listen, when I arrive, I'll text you to let you know that I get there on time so you don't have to worry about it. Or, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I'm there plenty early. So if your schedule flexes a little bit, you have to worry that I'll be there ready to start on time. So I'm not saying if you choose me, I'll do this. I'm just sort of now talking in the context of that I'm doing this, Or I might say, well, this is going to be great. Listen, as a next step, what we'll do is, we'll hop on a call. I'll learn more about your organization. My team's going to get to work. We'll roll up our sleeves and start doing proactive research to make sure that it's highly relevant and customized. So I don't oversell that, but I do tend to drop a little bit of language at, as if this is happening. And then what I try to do is just sort of end with a clear next step, and again, reinforce gratitude. Thank you again for your consideration. I hope that it's the right fit for you. It feels like it is for me. And if there's anything I can do to help you make this decision easier, just let us know. So that is my basic strategy for a pre-booking call. And I'd be curious to hear from you, questions, thoughts, observations, additional tips.
I thought that was pretty comprehensive.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Do you do something like that, or how do you handle a pre-booking call?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try and make a human connection, sort of right off the bat. I think gratitude is a great tip, and I try and find that common thread and connect with them on a human level before a client to speaker level. So, and I definitely tease out the content too. which I think is important, just to give them a sense, because they just want to know, like, what is he really going to be talking about? And is it really going to resonate? And so I find, like, sometimes the more I go into it, the better it goes, because they feel safer. They really understand, okay, I get it. I know the top line of what he's talking about. Now I actually know more of the details of what he's going to speak about. And I think that's going to resonate with our crowd. So.
I had a question. This is Krister. I'm a new speaker. How much information do the people in the call typically have about, I mean, have they already seen like a 5-minute talk that we've done, or is it more likely they've seen nothing, just read a bio? What do you find in practice happens?
You know, it's really variable. Great question, Krister. It really varies. So sometimes they will have watched everything they could find on you. Sometimes, like, maybe the meeting planners have seen a lot, but now, like, a decision maker's on the call and he just got your bio 30 seconds earlier and has no idea who the heck you are. So I think you just got to be prepared for any circumstance. And I just try to make sure that the call itself, on a standalone basis, will close the deal. So if I'm unsure what they've seen or not, I want to make sure that I say enough key points that they can make a thoughtful decision. Any of the other folks on the call have any other either questions, but also best practices, anything else, like Shep, anything you do specifically on these type of calls?
Sure. And by the way, I use the same terminology that you do. It's a pre-booking call, and then it's a content call. And one of the questions I want to plant as a seed in their mind is, I ask a question: what are 3 things that you want this audience to walk away with? That helps me define what's necessary to have success on that particular day. But more importantly is the second question, and I don't expect anybody to answer this today because I think it takes thought. If we were to get together a year from now, what would have had to have happened for you to feel that this was a huge success? So those are 2 big questions that I like to ask.
And Shep, real quick, do you ask those on your content call or on your pre-booking call, or both?
Actually, I plant the seed in the pre-booking call, and I get really specific with the content call.
Cool. Good advice.
Josh, I did something similar from listening to very similar feedback when we were at the boot camp, and one of my friends asked me to take a walk into Wells Fargo, and I did the same thing that Shep just said. After they said, "Hey, you're looking at being a keynote speaker. What can you do for us?" And I just took a step back. I said, "Well, I've got a lot of arrows in my quiver. Tell me what 3 things that you would like to accomplish for your team." And we started talking about they wanted better customer service. They wanted a better customer experience. And then, much like you said also, I just teed it up with the empathy. I said, I understand the way you feel. Other customers have felt the same exact way. And what we found is we can make a presentation here with some measurable, actionable steps afterwards, so that in a year down the road, you'll be in a better position. I didn't qualify it as much as Shep would have asked, but I just gave him a general picture as to make sure I left that little nugget of information. Is what are you looking for a little while down the road? And it went real well. We were going to give a presentation to just the local branch, and then they wanted to scale it next month to wait for the regional presentation where there'd be a lot more people. So those tips worked very well for me this week.
Great.
One of the things that I heard someone say about sales, which I think is really brilliant, is that in a sales call, whoever does the most talking leaves with the product. So that the salesperson does the most talking, he or she is going to walk out with their product not having sold it, whereas if the customer does the most talking, they're going to leave the product.
Yeah, well said. And sometimes people really do that. I find that the more, also, by the way, to piggyback on that, Bob, the more people start talking, then they feel like they've invested in you a bit. Like, I was on a pre-booking call recently, and I said almost nothing, and the CEO went on and on and on and on. But at that point, the deal closed because he didn't want to have to go repeat that to another person. He felt like I understood and listened, and I would do an okay job. So the ratio is probably 85% him talking, 15% me, which is a good ratio. It's hard for us speakers to do because we love hearing our own voice. But the more listening, the better. I totally agree. Okay, cool. Well, let's move on to the next kind of key important call here, which is Shep calls his the content call. I call mine the kickoff call. But the idea is basically that the contract is signed, and now this is at least one touch point between the contract being signed and the time you show up to give your keynote. So again, I'll walk you through my strategy, and again, we'll open it up for questions or additional thoughts. The first one is, once again, I start with gratitude. Again, how could that be wrong? So, which is, by the way, it's heartfelt, but you just say, I always start, listen, even before we kick things off, I just want to once again thank you for the opportunity to contribute. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna do everything I can to make this a giant win for us all. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Let's dive in. So you're showing enthusiasm and gratitude. Can't hurt. Just like the pre-booking call, I have a couple of goals. The goals for me are, once again, make them feel understood. Can't go wrong there. Make them feel like they've made the best choice ever. You've probably heard the term buyer's remorse, like you bought the car and you wish you didn't 2 days later. Here, I want to make sure that quite the opposite, that they're feeling buyer's delight. Like, oh man, am I glad I made that choice. And then I also try to set the energy for the relationship. I want to start to make it feel like we're buddies, we've got a good groove going on, and when we show up to the event, we're not just doing a business transaction. To a degree, we're friends. So I do. Like, again, it's a sort of a continuation of the pre-booking call. I will ask a ton of questions and listen like a machine. So I keep going deeper and deeper and asking more questions. I say, oh, well, you said this. Can you tell me more about what you meant? And so it's not like I'm just getting through it as quick as I can. I try to really dive in. Even if I kind of already know where they're going with it, again, it's about making them feel understood, making them feel like they had the opportunity to really share. So I thought I'd share with you, before I said like those are my 4 key points I want to get across, these are my favorite questions. These are my 5 favorite questions, 6 favorite questions that I like to ask on a kickoff call. First one, in no particular order, by the way, I say, hey, I said something like this: are there any topics that I should avoid? And then I quickly, even before that, I let them answer that. I say, to be clear, I would never talk about politics, religion, nothing inappropriate, obviously, but are there any landmines that could be out there? It could be a regulatory issue. It could be a competitive threat. It could be a product from the past. Just something that I would step on a landmine that would be distracting rather than helpful. Now, I say this, every time I say that, the client says, oh, thank you, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. 9 times out of 10, they say, nope, everything's great, nothing's off limits. But part of what I've done is I've told them in the form of a question that I won't say anything inappropriate, that I'm not going to talk about religion, I'm not going to talk about politics. I've, to a degree, removed that layer of fear that their speaker is going to come up and say the wrong thing. There are some times, by the way, that someone will say something like, hey, I'm so glad you asked. We did this acquisition 3 years ago, and the people from that acquisition are going to be in the room, but there's some tension, so don't mention like this particular company or whatever. And you know what? You'd rather know that than not know it. So it's a harmless question. It's only upside in asking it. Question number 2 that I like to ask. I say, what's the mood? What's the business mood coming in? Are people coming in feeling like they had a great year, they can conquer the world, they're ready to run through walls? Are they coming in feeling a little bit reluctant? Are they feeling kind of beaten down by the competition? How are people feeling coming into the event? This is actually really helpful. First of all, it makes them feel understood. Second of all, if they've got a bunch of excitement coming in, I can play off that. If they've got a bunch of fear coming in, I can play off that. But basically, I want to know which side of the coin they're coming in. Generally speaking, the audience is coming in, because I can use it to my advantage to help connect with that audience in person. Third key question I like to ask. So the folks in the room, what do you think they're most worried about? When they wake up every day, what do you think 1 or 2 of their biggest concerns might be? This is a wonderfully powerful question. Again, they feel understood. They feel like you're digging deep. For you, you can work on those. So whatever solution you're suggesting, Ben, if you're talking about doing the impossible, or Shep, you're talking about customer service, or Bob, you're talking about the patient experience, whatever they say those concerns are, you can use that. So like if mine is people are concerned about increasing speed and competition, when I'm doing my speech, I can say, listen, I know a lot of you in the room are really concerned about increasing speed and competition. And it just use that to reinforce the point you were going to make. So understanding what their concerns are and what their mood is coming in are 2 kind of back-to-back questions that I found to be very helpful. Question number 4 I like to ask. Is there a stated visible goal? So for example, some companies say might have a goal, $2 billion by 2020, or their goal might be stock price of a certain amount, or customer satisfaction number of a certain amount, or we're going to double our number of customers by this date. A lot of times there's like a rallying cry goal in companies, and I like to use that also. So let's say someone said, yeah, we're going to have $2 billion in revenue by 2020. I could come right out of the chute and say, hey, you know, after you maybe tell an opening story, you might say something like, listen, I know we've got some big goals here. I know we're all aiming for this $2 billion mark by 2020. We got to really roll up our sleeves and figure out how to get there, because we might not be able to do the exact same thing and achieve that type of big result. And so throughout my talk track, throughout my points, I might just keep referencing this 2 billion by 2020. That's this teeny little bit of customization. Like, that didn't take research. I didn't have to spend hours and hours, but I know that that's a key point for them. I reference it throughout the talk. Now they feel like it's really customized and I'm speaking directly to them and their needs. So the question again is there like a big visible goal that you folks have? That you folks have? Question number 5 that I love to ask. You might say something like this. You mentioned that you've had some speakers in the past, and you mentioned, I would often ask, like, who's spoken in the past at this event? I like asking this. In the past, if you think kind of in your mind about some of the previous speakers, is there one thing that you wish they had done differently? Or maybe if they say, oh, last year I had, pick a speaker. I had Mel Robbins last year. I say, oh, I love Mel. She's awesome. Listen, is there one thing that you wish Mel had done differently? It's just an easy way. It's not nothing against Mel. Mel's freaking awesome. But the question is asking them to tell you what they want from you in a non-confrontational way. So you can, even if you don't know the name, you can say, listen, have you had a speaker in the past that you really loved? Oh, yeah, I had Shep Hyken. Oh, I love Shep. He's the best. Hey, is there one thing you kind of wish Shep had done differently or better? There you go. So you might get them to say, oh, you know what? Shep was terrific, but he had to catch a flight afterward. I wish he'd stayed 20 more minutes. And just got to shake some hands with our audience because everyone loved him so much. So now I know that. Now, if I really want to delight the client, maybe I'll check my flight and make sure I can do what they're asking. Okay, my final question, which I just love this one, is I asked, and I think I talked about this last week in our boot camp for those that were there in November, but I say on a scale from 1 to 10, I want to deliver an 11. That's my goal. So in your mind, what does an 11 look like? Kind of like your question, what success look like a year after? So I say, imagine that we finished the event and we're slapping high five and you're like, hey man, that was an 11. What does that look like to you? And so they might say, well, you know, the big thing for us is making sure they walk away with some takeaway value. And if they're walking away like that, I feel like it's great. I'm like, oh, cool, that's an 11? Yeah, that's an 11. So I've not only, they appreciate the question, and I kind of know what's going to really delight the audience, but to a degree, train them a bit. And I've had this, I don't know, dozens of times. People will come up to me after the thing, shake your hand, like, oh man, that was an 11. Like I've started, they're using the language that I just trained them on. And so, and what better do you want them to think that you just delivered an 11? So you ask the question just like that. On a scale from 1 to 10, my goal here is to deliver an 11. Could you just share with me what would an 11 look like for you? And then I just try to make sure I hit those points. So they're like, listen, some of the speakers in the past have been low energy. If you come out like super high energy and really get our folks fired up, that would be an 11 for me. Good to know. So now when I go deliver it, and then afterwards we're slapping a 5, like, oh, dude, that was an 11, you know, mission accomplished. 2 other quick things for the kickoff call, best practices, and then I'd love to hear from you or answer any questions. One is, these aren't questions anymore, now I'm just moving on to best practices. This is something I do, you don't have to, just my own thing. I would say, hey, if I may, let me give you my mobile number. If you need to text me, call me, hit me day or night, I'm happy to chat with you. If you have a question on site, I have my mobile in my pocket all the time. Here's my mobile number. Now, you might think, gosh, I don't want people pestering me in the middle of the night. I've given this out hundreds of times. I rarely get a call, if ever. I might get a text day of, hey, we're in the ambassador room. You know, what's your ETA? Fine. But just by doing that, people are like, thank you so much. I mean, it's basically you're reinforcing that they made a great decision. This guy is so accessible and so flexible, so willing to help, and so here to serve. And a lot of times speakers don't do that. Like, well, you want to talk to me, we'll call my agent, and my bureau will call the other agent, and then my assistant will call this person. I'm like, look, here's my cell phone number. Hit me day or night. The other thing I like to do is if there is some question about either content or structure, I like to provide a multiple choice again. So if they're like saying, hey, which talk do you think you should give or whatever, I might say something like, listen, now that I understand your objectives, there's probably 2 ways we could handle it. I could frame the whole thing as around my most recent book, Hacking Innovation, and we could borrow from the sinister mind of hackers and it would take people on this kind of cool journey through the dark underbelly of the universe, but not to teach or promote cybercrime, but rather to learn from those people and be uplifting and fascinating. The other thing we could do is we could frame the whole thing as startups. You know, startups are a very hot trend, and I've spent 27 years in the startup world. This would be taking people like behind the scenes and how to think and act like a startup. And by the way, you could do that even though your company has 50,000 employees, giving them the view of the world through a startup lens. So between the hacker thing and the startup thing, which do you think might feel best for you or your audience? So again, the multiple choice thing is kind of cool because you're narrowing the choices. You're not giving unlimited possibilities, but then they feel like they're a part of the process and now they're going to take ownership in it. So if they choose the hacking thing, now it's like they want it to win just as much as you do because they're part of the process. So I'm going to pause there. Those are my best practices and some questions I'd like to ask for a kickoff meeting. Questions that you may have and or additional best practices you'd like to share.
I'm still new. I don't have a bunch yet.
Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think this webinar has been an 11.
And Josh, I wanted to end with that comment, Ben. You beat me to it, but truthfully, this is why this is the after experience I think you deliver to the 3-ring circus, and I think everybody needs to understand if they're not jumping on these calls, they are missing a huge opportunity. And I think you record the calls, right? So they're available. Yeah. So great job, and thank you for sharing this. And even though I've been doing this for many, many years, I wrote down everything you said, and I know I say it a different way, but man, you make me think about it differently. So thank you very much.
That was awesome. No, my pleasure. Any questions that this raises for anybody? Anything that we can answer on either of these 2 calls or anything else, just since we're having now kind of an open dialogue.
I have a question, Josh. I'm just wondering if after you've ever gone through all these steps, and this is open to the other speakers too, because I'm on the front end of this, have you ever had to go like in a service recovery mode because things didn't go well, or maybe it wasn't a good fit? Just kind of a general question.
I have not had to do that, and I don't say that in a boastful way at all. I mean, but I haven't had that experience. I try really hard to make sure that it's the right fit. I've had things go wrong, believe me, like tech crazy stuff, or like timing is weird or whatever. But I've never had to go into disaster recovery mode. Anybody else on the call have to deal with that?
Every speech I give is an 11.
Of course it is.
No, I'll tell you a great story that happened to me just recently, and was working with a client. It was 4 dates for the same client, 1 a week. At the end of the first date, it was they asked me to do a long program, 2 hours. I told them it was too long, and it turned out I was right, and that isn't the important point. Everything in that afternoon needed to be cut. So the president of the company said, I want you to shorten your speech by about 15 minutes, and I don't know what you cut, and I really don't care. It was really a good speech. It was just too long. But the interactive thing you did almost at the end, I want you to move that to the front. And he's starting to direct me on what to do. And I started thinking about how much money they were paying me, and I really should be listening to what they were suggesting. I actually did exactly what he asked to do. I had, that was the second speech, and it worked. I tried it again on the third speech. It worked really, really well, even better. I was getting more comfortable with the idea. Then I had a speech in between the third speech and the fourth speech with another client. I tried it with that client. It was phenomenal. They made me better. And I think it's really important, the lesson here is that feedback is a gift. And even if you think, what does this guy know about me? I've been doing this 35 years. How long has he been doing it? He's just an executive. You have to listen and take everything into consideration.
Well said.
Great feedback. Thanks.
I had a question on so before the pre-booking call, in a couple times where I've started to, and this is when I was trying to do just getting free speaking gigs. I feel like I've kind of lost it before I even got there because in answering the question, what do you talk about? I basically gave them too much information. Maybe my question is, how do you get to a point where you don't rule yourself out by saying, so I talk about leadership and relationships, and then the person would be like, oh yeah, we don't want that. We want something else.
Well, I think,
how do you handle the call before, or the steps before the pre-booking call?
Well, in our case, usually we're getting on that call because they've expressed some interest. So like a bureau has spoken to them, presented me, the client says, okay, now we're down to our short list. Let's hop on this pre-booking call. So usually that pre-booking call, the sort of fit has already been kind of pre-established, or they've called because, website or whatever. But if I was talking to somebody where you're not sure it's the right fit, what I might say is that, like, let's say, Christopher, you were that person and we're just exploring it. I'd say, Christopher, I'd love to hear from you what you're hoping to accomplish at this event. And by the way, I might not be the right fit. And if I'm not, I'd rather tell you that than disappoint you. So why don't we just share, tell me what's going on, and we'll see if there's a fit. So I immediately started listening before telling them what I speak about. And then if you really think there's not a fit, like you're better off telling them it's not a fit than failing. But let's just say I was thinking in my mind, it was all about startup thinking. But really what I heard them is that they need to hear about how to be more innovative on a daily basis or something like that. So I can then respond in a way, to a degree, responding back to what they're asking for and showing how what I can deliver might be a good fit. And then since you listen to them first, you're avoiding the trap of sharing something that would be off the rails.
Can I jump in on that? And I think 100% asking them what they expect, what they want the outcome to be is paramount before you can give a specific answer. But one of the things that I've learned is that when somebody asks you what you do for a living, if you give them like, I'm a blank, I'm a professional speaker, I'm a customer service expert who speaks, I'm an innovation expert, whatever. I think sometimes that isn't the answer that they really need to hear. I think the better answer is describe the outcome of what you do. And I'll give you an example. Somebody says, what do you do for a living? And I'll say, well, best way to describe it is this. Have you ever walked out of a business or hung up the phone or just done business with anybody where you afterwards said, wow, those people are fantastic? And the person says, yes. Well, that's what I help my clients do. I help them create amazing customer experiences. And I don't need to tell them I'm a speaker on this. I'm a leadership speaker. I'm a change management expert. It's all about the outcome.
Thank you. That's good.
Great.
I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Any other questions on anyone's mind here this afternoon?
Just a quickie, going back to the boot camp. Josh, you had said you guys were going to send out some information about contracts.
Yes. We'll make sure that we get that out. We're going to send out templates of our contracts and a couple other just sort of like we'll send you a contract. Like Jonathan does an amazing job with, we call it like a dossier, but it's like a logistic breakdown of exactly, what's the flight number, who's picking you up, what's the confirmation number, where's your hotel. It's kind of like a flight plan. So we'll send you a few of our templates, including the contract, including that, and then we'll see if we can dig up some other things. So we'll send that out shortly.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Just a follow-up between the pre-booking call and the booking call. After the Wells Fargo, I just went out to visit a few of their offices. Fortunate enough for me, I have a Wells Fargo account, so I was able to go in, make a couple deposits, take a couple withdrawals out, and ask for some information. I found a lot of different things that are going to help them out. For example, some people were saying, no problem. Some people were saying, you got it, dude. Some people were saying, sir. Some of the great experience where people apologized for the wait that I had in line and called me by name and said, thank you for being a customer for so many years. So I think that helped a lot between the two calls to get an idea of, number one, what they wanted to accomplish, and then number two, what was happening in their branches in the real world. That painted a really good, clear picture for me before I go out there next month.
Cool. One of the things that we've experimented with, and I don't know that we have data to support whether this works or not, but I've done things where I've done like a look in the camera and send them a quick video. So let's say we're down to the final three and be considered, and we've got a little video set up here at the office. I might do a look in the camera kind of thing, like, hey, friends at Lowe's, thanks so much for your consideration for this upcoming date in April in Las Vegas. I'd be delighted to contribute. Hey, based on the call that we just had, I had a few thoughts I just wanted to reflect on and share with you, and maybe helpful as you make your decision. So I've done it a handful of times. I don't know that there's a direct correlation between closing rates or not, but that is one little thing we've tried. Another thing I've tried doing sometimes is having some fun with it. So it wasn't a pre-booking call, it was through the bureau, but we had a thing with McDonald's. And I was kind of like, I mean, all of us have probably a relationship with McDonald's, kids and all that. So I went out and took pictures of me like modeling down a cheeseburger. And I did another day, I was like, we did a little video where I was eating an Egg McMuffin or whatever. And we sent this over in kind of like a fun, playful way that I'm a brand loyalist. And we did get the gig. I don't know if that was the result, but the reason or not. But, we're always trying to experiment. Like, what are the little things that we could do to tip the scales in our favor? Some deals are going to win anyway. Some deals are going to lose anyway, no matter what you do. But those ones on the fence, are there any things that you can do to drive the results in your favor?
That's cool.
All right. Well, last call for any final questions before I let everyone go enjoy the rest of their Friday.
Josh, is there anything we can do to help you?
Oh man, thanks, Rich. You know what? Yeah.
What a suck up. What a suck up.
There is something you can do. I would just, so as you know, we are really passionate about this. Like I'm really hoping everyone on this call and everyone that we've connected with, we help them in a way that's profound, that's driving their speaking career. And so if you could just continue to provide us feedback, like Rich, if you're out there on the road and you're like, hey, a couple things I did in the boot camp really made a difference in a positive way, just like let us know. Or the opposite, of course. If something doesn't work, let us know too. I think just the more continuous loop feedback that we have as a three-ring circus family, the better, because it helps us feel great when we're helping you win. And if there's something wrong, that's great for us to know too, so we can help others avoid the same trap. So I think the quick answer is just, the closer we can stay to your speaking business, the better.
Yeah, and I tried to do that in the feedback form that you sent out right afterwards. So hopefully that was actionable feedback. If it wasn't, give me a ring. Happy to talk to you about that. And I want to give you a shout out, Josh. I sent you something, I think, about 10 o'clock the night after we got done. And by 10:05, I'd already gotten a response from you. So you are truly on top of your email.
Thank you. I try, man. Not easy always. All right, everyone. Well, thanks again. I wish everyone a great rest of your week. And if I don't speak to any, I don't expect to many of you soon, but if not, have an amazing holiday season. We look forward to staying in close touch.
One quick question. Shep had asked about whether this was recorded and we could refer back to it. Where would we find that recording?
Yeah, we will send it out in a Dropbox link so you can all access it right after this also.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks very much.
Great job, guys.
Thanks all. Good to see you all again.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.